Welcome to Wider View, the program that provides perspectives on the news outside the narrow confines of the mainstream media. I'm your host, Charles Dunaway. Today I'm delighted to welcome Catherine Shakdam back to Wider View. Catherine is a geopolitical analyst and a commentator on the Middle East with a special focus on Yemen and the Gulf countries. She's also a researcher with the Al Bayan Center for Planning and Studies and the founder of Veritas Consulting. Catherine spoke with me from her home in the UK. I thought we'd start with this Imperialism on Trial conference that you were involved in Derry in Northern Ireland, which was toward the end of March.
Yeah.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that was and what happened there.
Okay, so for me, first of all, I very much enjoyed the conference. It was my first time in Ireland. So I had a little bit of history lesson by the organizer, Greg, where he explained to me, and I was actually quite surprised because even though I did know, of course, of the main outlines of history when it comes to Britain, but I had no idea just how profound and how marked people in Ireland continue to be to this day, and they hold a grudge, and I think rightly so, because I think a great injustice was done to them, and I don't think that England ever really admitted to it. I think that's why there's such an ability from the Irish to actually emphasize and really understand what it is that is happening in the Middle East and what imperialism actually looks like from up close and personal. So I was very touched because people were very welcoming. They were very open to admitting to some of their ignorance because we can't know about everything all the time. And I found them very honest. And I think this is kind of reassuring to me because I'm thinking, okay, if we can connect with people who have, different traditions, a different history, but that can actually relate to the idea of injustices and resistance, then we're onto something. And I think this is for me, that was the main thing that I took away from it, is that we don't realize just how many people actually connect to this imperialism notion, and the fact that, not just Britain, but other countries in the West have been driving a wedge against a lot of communities, many nations, for no other reason really than just to kind of expand their bottom line. And I think it's the real human tragedy because many people are getting lost in that. A lot of crimes are being committed in the name of not just capitalism, because I'm not making here the case for socialism or communism, but it's really this unfettered capitalism that is a danger. Because the second that we lose sight to how it's impacting community and people on their daily lives, then we have lost, for me, the plot. Because this disconnect is leading to injustices and people feeling disenfranchised and not listened to. And I think that the main thing about promoting the right kind of democracy is not so much the system of governance, but the point is that people need to feel represented. They need to feel heard. However that happens is not so much a worry for me, because I do think that people have a right to political self-determination. And if they want even a monarchy, that's fine, as long as it's wanted by the people and that it serves the people.
Right.
So I'm definitely hoping that Greg will do more and more often, so we could just have fun and just keep bashing at the powers that be, and then they will hate us some more.
We've talked about the Middle East before, and I think the Middle East right now is is a great example of somewhere where imperialism, just in the last several weeks, we've had the United States declaring that part of Syria is really part of Israel because Israel says it is, declaring that Jerusalem is not really an international city, but is capital of the Jewish state. And we're now seeing what's called I would call the Kushner peace plan being, which we haven't yet seen yet. We've heard a few rumblings about. But again, this to me falls under the heading of imperialism. This is not self-determination by the people who live in the area. Would you agree?
I agree 100%. The problem with today is that I think we're moving away from what we understood before as imperialism, because we did have different versions, because we moved away from the colonies per se to this kind of neo-imperialism where you had the United States and other countries in the West mainly using military interventionism to kind of create those military outposts and then try to lean very heavily on governments to create client states as an extension of their own foreign policies and to benefit, again, the bottom line. And now I think that because of, I think, the erosion of our democracies across the world, people are withdrawing behind what I call a new form of fascism. It's a form of political tribalism. You can see this in America. I think the most. It's very open now, and it's impossible not to see it. Is that you have the Republicans and the Democrats on very different side of the river, bashing each other and denying each other's legitimacy, which is very dangerous to do in a democracy, where you have a president that is more and more using, he's going to the very end, to the very extreme of his executive power, which is a bad idea, again, in a democracy where I think that everyone needs to use forbearance and not to be willing to go to the very extreme, and only in very, very particular cases, because otherwise you can't, this balance it kind of shifts, and it's dangerous because you're setting a very dangerous precedent. And I think that America has done that already. And the democracy that they have is a very presidential democracy. And it's very dangerous when you have someone like Donald Trump at the presidency. And you see the result in the Middle East. And I think that this tribalism that they have is that it's always us versus them, whoever is the them, is now being transferred to the Middle East. So now you have Israel running this kind of policies. And I think they kind of like invented it in a way because it's sealed in their constitution. Israel is for the Jews, for the Jewish people, not for anyone else. And it's a dangerous statement to make when you call yourself a secular democracy, of course.
Right.
And so now you have, this desire to say, well, this is our land, and whoever was there before, we actually don't care because they have been dehumanized. They don't exist really for us. The Israelis have done this. They have turned it into an art form. So now they're trying to convince the world that the Golan Heights belong to Israel, never did Syria, which is ridiculous again. But again, for me, it's a natural evolution of this political tribalism. It's very, very dangerous because all those fault lines that Britain actually created on purpose at the end of the Sykes-Picot Agreement will be ignited, and we have seen it. What happens in Iraq? When America went into Iraq trying to topple Saddam Hussein, they were expected to be welcomed, with open arms. It wasn't the case because they failed to understand the demographic of Iraq and understand that not only there was a religious element, of course, but there was also a tribal element, and that not all people were happily together there under Saddam Hussein, and that those people suddenly wanted to say, hold on a second, the Sunni minority was ruling with an iron fist for so many decades, that so many other communities felt disenfranchised, that now they had the opportunity to seek not just revenge, but they wanted power. The Americans never understood that properly, and it exploded in their face. And then we saw the rise of Daesh, of course. So my fear is that after everything that Syria has gone through, if we continue to push this kind of politics and we continue to fan out sectarianism, tribalism, all these different differences, ethnicities that exist already, that we need to tamper with, not ignite, we're going to have a massive mess on our hands, because the Kurds will wake up and they can argue that why not? They have the right to political self-determination. They have the right to a land, technically speaking. You would explode Turkey, Syria, Iraq. All those regions that, are very geopolitically charged. So you would have powers such as Russia and China and America and Britain and France and Germany having to get involved because, of course, they don't want to let go of because of natural resources, obviously. It's a very dangerous recipe for, hyper militarism. And I'm worried about that because I don't think that anyone has an understanding of what they're playing with.
No, and it seems to me that the U.S. is quite clearly pursuing a policy of creating chaos, of exploiting, as you say, these differences between peoples, these tribalisms that can explode.
But they're not exploiting. I don't think they're exploiting. I think they are they're downright bullies that do not understand, how sophisticated, this region is in terms of the differences that people have. And so they're just, going and thump, and Donald Trump have no understanding, no idea. He doesn't care either. He just looks at the Middle East as this big corporation that he wants to aggressively take over. And that's dangerous because it's not going to work this way at all.
I can see no actual benefit to the United States as a nation, certainly. I can see a benefit to Israel
Hmm.
to have all of its neighbors split up and chaotic and not governable. And I can see a benefit to U.S. corporations that are selling military hardware and so forth, but
Absolutely.
and to the ones who want to drill off the coast of Syria or Lebanon or whatever. Foreign policy that we have is not really what Trump said he was going to produce, was a foreign policy that put us first. It really doesn't put us first. I mean, unless by us we mean,
The elite.
yeah,
It depends who you mean by us. Yeah, I
yes,
think he was talking about cooperation and the friends that
right.
that with whom he plays with golf, at golf. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a shame because I look at America, and America has lost. It's not just its shine when it comes to democracy, but its standing, because no one trusts America anymore. And you see other power rising, but the thing that I think is very interesting and that people are not paying too much attention to is that we take America's friendship for granted, in the sense that America, for the longest time, has been friends with, Saudi Arabia, for example, Israel, and then we somehow expecting Israel and Saudi Arabia to always be friends with America, because you're thinking, well, America is a superpower, it does make sense. Actually, it doesn't, because if you look at what Saudi Arabia, and I'm not a great fan, has done
No,
lately. I don't like them at all, but it's interesting because since America wants to have this bill go through to be able to sue any OPEC countries in the US, Saudi Arabia has threatened to actually to drop the petrodollar. And I think that's interesting because this is something that, for example, Iraq before the war was floating around. This is something that Muammar Gaddafi in Libya said he would do, and
right.
he was going to. This is something that the Chinese have vaguely referred to. Russia wants to do it as well, Brazil and other countries. So I could see a point in time, and I think it's going to be rather sooner than later, where America, because of its very aggressive policies, is really isolating itself to the point where its former partners will actually smell blood and realize that a friendship with America is actually counterproductive when it comes to regional stability. Don't forget that the Saudi, for all the hate that they may throw at Iran, they still live in the region. They can't afford to piss off every single neighbor that they have. It's not sustainable. So they're angry with Qatar, they're angry with Yemen, they're angry with Iran, they're angry with Turkey. It depends on which day of the week. And I'm pretty sure that one day they're going to be thinking, hold on, what has America done for us really, other than dig a hole in our budget, other than actually make us look like fools on the international scene, because we look more like lapdogs than we do actually a sovereign nation. Um, so I think that America needs to be very careful, because it's only powerful because other countries are allowing it to be, if you know what I mean. Because if you're not in this dynamic where you agree and kind of like bow to America's strength, America doesn't have any leverage. I mean, other than militarily, but then again, you can't declare war to everyone. We need way too many fronts. I mean, I see America as having, I could see it soon, where you're going to have a lot of diplomatic fallouts where people will say, do you know what? Actually, no, we don't want to talk to you anymore. We don't care about you anymore. You're not that
Right.
relevant.
Well, yeah, and I think that I frankly think that that could be a very good thing for the world as a whole.
Yes.
But and what's happening, it seems to me, also in the Middle East, is that other players are beginning to step forward, particularly Iran, who's doing a lot of talking about regionalism at this point, and they're sending, they're meeting with the Qataris, and they're meeting in Lebanon, they're going to Iraq and spending, a considerable more time than Trump was spending there. And I think beginning to work towards some kind of regional anti-hegemonic group of countries. They're jumping in. Russia is certainly jumping in terms of Syria and other things, providing an opportunity for
Yeah,
other players.
definitely. I will say this, if because I think that the main what will allow for success would be Iraq, because in Iraq you have Sunni, Shias, and Kurds. So
Mhm.
if they can find a way to make it work and to kind of like get over the old upsets and resentments that were created over the decades, and if Iran manages to have a breakthrough with Turkey, which is possible, I mean, again, with Turkey, it's complicated, but I think it could be done, then we might actually have a shot at a grand regional alliance where they would agree that they need to, rather than look for solution by turning towards Washington or Paris or London, that they would need to find a solution amongst themselves, a solution that works for them. We might get somewhere, because systematically people tend to turn towards, for example, Paris, and say, oh, whatever should we do? And I'm thinking, why are you asking them? They're the one who created the problem in the first place. And it's actually in their interest to just keep it that way. So why don't you just sort it out for yourself? Stop looking out for a solution. Right. I think that we might get somewhere. And Iran, I think, is well positioned to speak to Turkey and Qatar and the rest, because of obvious geopolitical policies there. And Iran is not belligerent. It's a superpower too in the region, so Turkey can't really ignore Iran's existence. And I think it could be a good thing. The only danger would be if, again, you have people who are more interested in running sectarian policies and advancing the agenda of one particular demographic, rather than look at the region as a whole and say, we have people there, those people have a right to be there because they're there. So let's just find a way to live together and to actually accommodate everyone, and find a way to, rather than look at it as a zero-sum game, whereas if I win, if you win something, then I'm losing. It's not like that. It doesn't work this way. Is that if we manage to find ways to communicate with one another and actually live peacefully, then we have a chance to grow together. And I think that's going to be the greatest challenge, is that for people to just stop looking at the other and think the other is the enemy, or is less human than I am, or has less right. We need to admit that we have all the same rights and responsibilities, and that we need to have a system that addresses that and affirms that. And I think that's the biggest challenge, because so far, I don't see anyone doing it, whether it's Turkey, Iran, Russia. No one is actually referring back to say, we need to go back to international law and this idea, in the Human Rights Declaration, that all people are born equal. That's a very important, for me, principle. We're not talking about this enough, because, the second you start to say it's an us versus them, then you don't have equality anymore. You don't have parties that are on par with each other. There's always this kind of imbalance. Right. You can't solve anything this way. So I think this is what I see. If they can do that, if they can manage to just establish a strong foundation, then yes, we could move away from, those ethnic and sectarian fault lines have existed for centuries. It's very difficult to move away from it. You're going to have someone with some serious political courage and charisma to say no more. It's the 21st century. This is the Middle Ages. Right. Let's move on. Let's just forget it. This is just stupid. Right. And I think it can be done, because if you look at the internet, for example, when people go online, suddenly all those differences kind of disappear. People don't identify as saying, I am a Christian, Syrian, whatever. They just go online and internet and on Facebook or whatever, and they just are themselves. So I think that people need to learn to just stop labeling each other too much. And you could be Christian or Shia, Sunni, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I think it shouldn't matter anymore. So we need to kind of drop the adjectives and just say we are just people. We live together. So what about we make it good for everyone, not just for like an elite, just everyone.
You're listening to UK-based geopolitical analyst Catherine Shakdam, and this is Wider View Radio.
I think that the American needs to start reclaiming their democracy.
Yes.
Because it's going wild, because they're not actually admitting that something is broken in the country. And I mean, America is the most powerful country in the world, whether we like it or not. And so it has the most, capacity to do bad things.
Well, yes.
But it has also the capacity to lead. So I think it's really down to the people. And I mean, again, you don't have to fall, within those dynamics of Democrats versus Republicans, because they all suck. I mean, I'm thinking it doesn't matter where I don't agree with anybody. It's terrible choice that people don't have a choice anymore. And I think it's terrible. And people need to really rethink their democracy and say, why do we have to abide by a system which is not working for us?
Right. It seems to me that parties disagree with each other, but they agree on two basic things, which are, global neoliberal capitalism and a foreign policy that says America is the exceptional nation and we can do whatever we want and we should police the world. Finally, in this particular upcoming presidential campaign, getting some glimmers of of people who don't seem to agree with that.
Hmm.
Although to what extent they may not agree is unclear at this time, I think. But I think that's a healthy sign that at least because we've not had that for a while.
True. But, I mean, I have hope because I'm thinking if you look at the way that, America has voted systematically since the 19th, I mean, since the Vietnam War, it always has been for a president or candidate that claimed to want to stop war and actually start to make peace
Mm-hmm.
systematically. Now, those presidents happen to have lied systematically,
Yes.
but I mean, if you look at from Bush Senior to Clinton to I mean all of them, they all said that they were running on the peace ticket, and America voted for peace. So I'm thinking the problem is not so much with the leadership, but rather, I mean, the issue is not with the people. The people in America do not want war. So it's a good sign. It's a good sign. It's the leadership that needs to get the message. But again, it's very difficult when you have a military budget that literally sucks the life out of the national budget and keep expanding your debt. It has gone so out of control that in order to keep your head above water, you have to continuously feed those lobbies because they have become so very powerful. And politicians serve the interests of the lobbies, less so the nation. Um, you don't have a way out of this. The only way out would be to actually change the law dramatically or have a different class of politician who would be willing to serve the people and actually clean, this form of political elitism and lobby and corporatism that is killing the nation because you are literally sending America towards a cliff. And there is no way out of it because right now all you're doing is maybe delaying the fall, but the fall still is going to happen because
Mm-hmm.
financially you can't keep up. You can't keep having a deficit that is eating out, oxygen and creating a hole in the ozone layer.
Right.
And that's what's happening right now. So I'm
Well,
thinking, could you guys wake up at some point and understand that you're talking about your future? And it's going to be a very bleak one unless America wake up and understand. Forget about food stamp right now, about the crimes. Forget that because it's going to get biblical in how it's going to be horrible. So, and I don't understand why people don't have those conversations in the UK, for example. People suddenly clocked in with the whole Brexit story. The UK is exporting something like over 300 billion worth of goods every year towards the EU.
mm-hmm.
If you look at the entirety of its export worldwide, other than the EU, it's not even a third of what it's sending to the EU. So now people are realizing that when we leave the EU, which they voted for, by the way, this is gone. So the 300 billion worth of good they were sending out is gone because they're going to have to renegotiate trade deals. And they basically lost their market because they're not going to be competitive in the EU market. So why would anyone buy their stuff? And people are saying, oh, they didn't tell us that. I say, yes, we did. You never listened because you were more interested in saying, oh, the immigrants and oh, these people, that people. People don't listen to data. And I think that's the problem because people refuse. They just prefer to react and to be passionate about ideas rather than can we look at the facts coldly and understand that you're shooting yourself in the foot. So you think you're being clever by saying America's first, but no, it's not helping you. So people need to wake up and smell the roses. This is 21st century. This is not, the Victorian era where Britain was still an empire. It's over. It's gone. Just let's move on.
I do hope that we come to some realization and try to find some way to stop what we're doing.
Yes.
It won't
Yes.
be easy.
No, but it will because I think it's already happening. People, I mean, you can see now even in the media. There's people are starting to come to terms with the fact that this is a show now. This is a circus, and people will start to look for the bottom again and say like this is not. We can't continue this way. I mean, you have to stay positive. It's going to be okay. I mean, it's going to, once, look, my prayer for America is like, please do not elect Trump again, please. Because I don't know what to do. I think I would move to Mars. But we can't have another 4 years of this crazy person. He's a despicable, he's a very dangerous president. There is nothing that he says that is remotely presidential or even educated at all. He just says things. So for the love of God, please don't do this to the world.
Well,
no,
yeah,
seriously, just no.
And I think it's very important that we realize that we're not just doing this to ourselves; we're doing it to the whole world.
Exactly.
And
we're begging you. We are begging you, please. Someone else.
We're not the only ones suffering. We're making everyone else suffer too. Yes.
Because you're the most powerful country in the world, and so it has an impact on everyone. Do you know? I mean, to the point where I'm actually arguing that the world should actually vote, in the presidential in America, because we have a stake in it. He wants to kill everyone. He wants to bomb this one and sanction that one and whatever. I mean, he wants now he wants to sanction Mexico, doesn't he? He wants to close the border or whatever he wants to do. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. You can't do this to countries. It's just insane. But he's doing it because he can.
He can. That's right.
Yes, he can. Executive orders. That's a scary thought. He could literally send America into like a world collision with China and Russia, for example, and there's nothing that your Congress or anyone can do to stop him. That's a problem for a democracy, in my mind.
Yeah, it's a problem for humankind. So, is there anything else that you would like to talk about while we, we have a couple more minutes left?
Well, the only thing, yes, I want to talk about Brexit. I have to say that of all the prime minister that we have had in the UK, and we have had some stupid ones, this one, Theresa May, takes the cake. I mean, she actually baked the whole cake to herself. I've never seen so much with such inability to lead. I mean, she has no clue what she's doing. She's insisting in doing the most insane things. She has made such a mess of this Brexit thing that she could actually cost the UK billions worth of pounds and actually send many millions of people under the poverty line. I mean, it's insane. It's at the point where I'm thinking, should the Queen step in? Can she step in because someone needs to do something? We need an exorcism Downing Street. It's just like she has to go. She doesn't want to go. This is the worst part. She refuses to go, and she needs to go. It's insane. So, I mean, I was for staying in the EU because I don't think that the plan that they had was workable to leave. I would like to leave the EU, but not in the way that they're trying to do it, because it's going to hurt people and not help. I think we need to stay within this common market because it makes sense economically. It makes sense for people to be able to go freely. But I think when it comes to the law and the fact that EU regulations are basically eroding at nation sovereignty and sovereign laws, I have a problem with that. So I think that should stop. People have a right to have their own laws, and I don't think that anyone should meddle with that. But other than that, the EU was just fine, but it was becoming a bit too much in terms of telling us what to do all the time. And I think that's what people had a problem with, not so much the common market. And I think that the problem is that we're gonna lose the common market, and that will set the UK back decades. I'm actually a little bit worried for the UK. So I was thinking it's okay because I have another passport. I could go to France.
France isn't doing that well either.
I know. I know. So I was thinking I might stay put. I don't know. But the capital flights alone that is leaving the UK right now is insanity.
Sounds like we have a real crisis of leadership here in the West.
It's not. There's a vacuum, and we desperately want a way out of it. We just don't know who could save us.
We don't know where to go.
I'm calling on the Queen to step up.
Catherine, it's really been fun talking with you again.
Thanks again to Catherine Shakdam. Look at the show notes at widerviewradio.podbean.com for links to her essays and books. That's our show for this week. I'm your host, Charles Dunaway. Thanks for listening.